Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donohue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donohue, and my usual cohort in creepitude is Sonia Mansfield, but she is still in Ireland on a work-vacation getaway. She's having a fabulous time, but fear not, everybody. We have an amazing guest host today. This is one of my, I think we're friends. I can say that we're friends, right?
Yes, we absolutely are. Yeah. And you're also one of my podcast heroes, if I can say that.
Well, she's one of my sheroes, my podcast heroes. This is Kristen Meinzer. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, Margot. I'm so excited to be here. I always call you Margot D in my head because, you know, your show Dorking Out, you have a Margot P also. So we have to differentiate.
Yep. That's actually book versus movie. We're going to go through all the stuff that we...
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. We both have so many shows.
Oh, my God. Yes. I listened to all your shows, and that was a flub on my part. Everybody listen to book versus movie. It is so good. If you love books, if you love movies, it's fantastic. Margot P and Margot D are fantastic together. But yes, Sonia is normally the co-host of this show, What a Creep, and Sonia is also the co-host of your fantastic movie show, Dorking Out. So corrections made.
No worries, y'all. We are the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. You can find us we have a basic Facebook page, but that's usually a place where people go to complain about our language. We use salty language in this program. So, Kristen, feel free to let it fly should you want to. I'm not going to force you. We are very interactive in our Facebook group, but it is private, so you do have to answer a few questions in order to join, and just don't be a creep and hang out there with us. And that's What a Creep podcast group. Just ask to join. We're on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, What a Creep podcast, spelled it all out. And we have an old-timey email, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. If you would like some stickers wherever you are on the planet of Earth, I will send them to you. So send us an email. Also, that's all those places are places where you can send us your suggestions for creeps and non-creeps. And if this is your first time listening, just so you know, we always end the show with somebody who's a non-creep, so you feel at least that the world is a total dumpster fire. So, Kristen, who are we talking about today?
Wow. I am so excited, Margot D, because today we are covering wellness world creep Hilaria Baldwin. And as you know, Margot, I co-host a show called How to Be Fine, which dives into the good and the bad of the wellness world, self-help, and so on. And Hilaria Baldwin is part of this universe. And so she is somebody who I'm very interested in, who I've done a lot of research on. She's actually been covered on How to Be Fine. And she's also somebody I'm interested in as somebody who also covers the tabloids in detail. As you know, I also host a show called The Daily Fail. The Daily Fail is kind of a comedic close reading sort of podcast. We look at the stupidest stories from the world's most read tabloid, and we debunk, we destroy, we fact check, we laugh a lot. And of course, Hilaria Baldwin shows up in the tabloids a lot.
The Daily Mail is something like, it's in my life. Yeah, I read it. I know it's bad for me. You know, it's like Diet Coke. Every once in a while, though, I've got to have one, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's true of a lot of things in life. Just because it's bad for us doesn't mean we don't enjoy it a little bit sometimes.
Indeed.
So sources for this episode, the list is very, very, very long. So I'm just going to name a few of them. The rest of the sources will obviously be in the show notes. So the sources include Insider, Vox, the Daily Mail. That's right. I am using the Daily Mail as a source because they actually hired a genealogist to work on the backstory of Hilaria Baldwin. So they had a legit genealogist at one point. Vulture, Vogue, the New York Times, LA Magazine, The Cut. The list goes on and on and on. So I'm not going to list everything here. We have over 20, maybe 30 sources for this episode. We also have the original Instagram feeds of Hilaria herself. So check that out if you want to be irritated, because her Instagram feed is very irritating. Let's start here. Hilaria Baldwin is a self-described wellness expert, yoga enthusiast, and mommy influencer. She co-founded the Yoga Vita Studios in New York. She hosted the now defunct Mom Brain podcast along with Dr. Oz's daughter, Daphne Oz. She starred in the DVD At Home with Hilaria Baldwin, Fit Mommy to Be Prenatal Yoga, which I am sure did not body shame any moms at all. Yes, it did. She wrote the self-help book, The Living Clearly Method. That's right, The Living Clearly Method. 5 principles for a fit body, healthy mind, and joyful life. But what she is most famous for being is the much younger Spanish wife of Alec Baldwin, who she married in 2012. She's the mother of their 7 Baldwinitos, as she calls them. She's an active social media presence whose posts are mostly about her children, about how quickly she takes off the baby weight, and her yoga poses in unconventional places, as well as her Spanish identity.
All of that very relatable, super
Yes.
relatable content. Oh, wow.
Now, Margot and listeners, you may have noticed I mentioned Hilaria's Spanish ethnicity more than once here, and that's because it is so central to who she is and what her brand is. So to give you an idea of just how central, let's talk about her wedding. When Alec Baldwin proposed, he took her to Montauk, Long Island, the furthest point east in New York State, because in his words, this is the closest I could get you to Spain. For their ceremony, I know. For their ceremony, she wore a traditional white Spanish mantilla veil. She waved a flamenco fan teasingly in Alec's face, and their wedding bands were inscribed with "Somos un buen equipo,"
Please tell me.
Translates to,
Go ahead.
"We are a good team."
Please tell me she also was singing La Ista Bonita by Madonna.
Oh my gosh. I wish she were. That would be great. But they did actually have Spanish music at the reception. I'm not sure if that was one of the songs that was played. After the wedding, Alec and Hilaria watched the Spanish national soccer team win the 2012 Euros competition. She told Vanity Fair España it was the first time Alec saw a game where Spain played and we won. In the same interview, okay, this is so good, and I'm so sorry because I kind of want to put on a Spanish accent here, but I'm just not going to because that would be offensive. But in the same interview, Hilaria claimed her family had a hard time pronouncing her new American last name. I had to repeat it to my family 3 times. Baldwin. And the 3rd time they said, "Oh, we already know who it is. Why didn't you pronounce it right the first time?" You understand my temptation here to put on her Spanish accent, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do that. Not going to do it. Soon after tying the knot, the couple was blessed with 1 child, then another until there were 7. Each of these little Baldwinitos was given a traditional Spanish name: Carmen, Rafael, Leonardo, Romeo, Eduardo, Maria, and finally Hilaria, named after Hilaria herself. As her family grew, she and her Baldwinitos received more and more press coverage. Perhaps you saw some of it. They landed multiple magazine stories, including several in the Hispanic and Latin American press, including Hola magazine and Latina magazine. And in these interviews, Hilaria emphasized how important it was for her to raise her children speaking her quote-unquote native Spanish language, and how important it was to introduce them to Latin culture, even though Spain is not Latin America.
No.
She also landed multiple TV appearances talking about marriage, parenthood, wellness, cooking, and again, her Spanish identity. In those interviews, she often spoke with a thick Spanish accent. And in one now infamous cooking segment on the Today Show, she paused and said, "How do you say?" when referring to a cucumber.
We have all these clips in the show notes, by the way, y'all. Just flip on the artwork and you'll find it for yourselves. It's truly spectacular.
It really is. It really, really is. On social media, Hilaria promoted her appearances in the Hispanic and Latinx press. She captioned photos of her children and her yoga poses in Spanish. She shared Spanish memes. And she also, okay, everybody get ready to cry here. She also spoke frankly about being marginalized as a Spanish woman in America. In one 2016 Instagram post, she talked about how often she was asked if she was the nanny because she speaks Spanish and doesn't look like, quote, her blonde, blue-eyed children. So marginalized. But fortunately, Hilaria was not alone in this oppression. She had the support of her husband, Alec, who proudly referred to her in interviews on TV shows as being from Spain. He did not want to hide her from the light. He wanted to shine a light on her Spanish heritage, to celebrate it. Sometimes he'd go so far as to imitate her, using a thick Spanish accent in appearances on The Rachel Ray Show, David Letterman, Extra, The Howard Stern Show, and loads of other programs. Again, I'm not going to imitate him imitating her, but just imagine a very thick Spanish accent. And Margot, I know you have a mashup of a bunch of clips of him imitating her on shows.
Yes.
Again, in the show notes. So if you did want to learn more about Hilaria's Spanish background, though, you wouldn't just have to listen to Alec speaking in these interviews. You could also just go straight to her CAA speakers page. That's Creative Artist Agency, probably the largest agency in the world for entertainers. And on her speakers page, it explained that she was from Mallorca, Spain, and told you a little bit more about her Spanish background. But then we know what's about to happen here, Margot. In late 2020, in December, I remember it vividly.
Yes.
I remember it so well.
We all remember when.
Yes. Hilaria's backstory got blown up. It all started when Hilaria posted a photo of herself in very tiny, very lacy underwear, holding her 3-month-old son, Eduardo, and showing off her svelte yoga body. Amy Schumer, who was supposedly friends with the Baldwins at the time, and she was a new mother herself to her son, Gene, she reposted the image with the caption, "Gene and I wanted to wish everyone a happy holiday season."
Which is genuinely hilarious.
Yes.
Self-effacing.
Yes. Most folks who saw it did think it was self-effacing. Most of them thought Amy was joking about the fact that her postpartum body actually looked like she'd recently given birth, unlike Hilaria's. Some folks also maybe thought that maybe Amy was poking fun at the whole image that influencers like Hilaria push out in the world, because that image can be very disparaging to women whose bodies actually look like postpartum bodies.
Right.
It can be part of a larger messaging of fat shaming and mommy shaming and so on. So some people just thought Amy was, doing a little bit of both, a little bit of self-effacement, but a little bit of, hey, maybe this isn't the way we should be celebrating women who just had kids. Either way, though, Hilaria just took it as an attack. She was incensed. She posted a 4-minute video to Instagram accusing Amy Schumer of attacking Eduardo, which she wasn't, and body shaming her personally.
She learned this from her husband because Alec was a creep episode that we did.
Yes.
And
great episode. Everyone check it out.
Definitely check it out. And 2 weeks after we put that episode up, the film set Rust had that shooting accident where a woman was killed. So we took that episode down and we were because we said, obviously this is going to change the man. Obviously he's going to have some come to Jesus moment. I'm not prioritizing things correctly. There are important things that can happen and tragic things that can. He's known for just flipping out. If his parking space is taken, he'll scream and yell. He's always getting in fights with paparazzi. And it's you've been famous long enough to know better.
Yes.
And you don't
just let it go.
Just let it go. Anyway, we reposted the episode because he obviously hasn't learned a goddamn thing. All right. Continue, Kristen.
Yes, and neither has Hilaria. And we will get back to that Rust shooting, and we'll get back to her not knowing how to leave it alone.
Yep.
So around the same time, Hilaria posts this video defending herself against Amy Schumer. Around the same time, a Twitter user with the handle Lenny Briscoe posted a thread, and it began, this is on Twitter, you have to admire Hilaria Baldwin's commitment to her decade-long grift where she impersonates a Spanish person. The thread included a link to the Today Show segment, which I mentioned, where Hilaria forgets the word for cucumber. It included a family obituary pointing to Hilaria's decidedly not Spanish ancestry and lots more. The thread received over 20,000 likes. And between all that rigmarole with Schumer and the Twitter posts by Lenny Briscoe, the public was suddenly paying a lot more attention to Hilaria. You know, she already had the mommy crowd, she already had the self-help crowd, and she already had the yoga crowd, but suddenly people who were not in any of those crowds were like, what? What's going on? She's not Spanish? She's pretending? What? So Tracy Egan Morrissey, who you may recognize her name because she was one of the founding editors of Jezebel, she decided, I'm going to do a deep dive here and share what I find with the public. So here is what Morrissey found out. She found out that Hilaria was actually born Hillary Hayward Thomas in Boston in 1984. Her mother, Catherine Hayward, was a doctor at Massachusetts General Hospital, an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, and a fourth-generation Massachusetts resident with zero Spanish ancestry. Hilaria's father, David Thomas Jr., was an attorney whose U.S. roots predated the American Revolution and included in his own words on a blog post, quote, not an iota of Spanish blood. Hilaria and her brother Jeremy were, in fact, raised entirely in the U.S. and were U.S. citizens. She attended the Cambridge School of Weston, a very elite private school in Massachusetts, and then enrolled at NYU when she was 19. But at a certain point in New York, you know, New York is a place of reinvention, right? We came here from other places. We decided to be other things, right? So she decided to reinvent herself. But what she reinvented herself as was a whole other ethnicity. So she began self-identifying as Spanish. She seemingly dyed her hair dark because suddenly it was a lot darker than it used to be. She seemed to have a year-round spray tan. Either that or her skin just got naturally darker somehow by living in New York. And she even told interviewers later that she moved to New York from Spain. So she didn't move here from Massachusetts. She moved here from Spain, right?
Right.
No.
Holy shit.
But full disclosure, to her credit, she did actually speak Spanish quite well. Mm-hmm. Her father was a Hispanophile. You know, there are Anglophiles, there are Francophiles. Hilaria's dad was very much a Hispanophile, and he did sometimes take his family on vacations to Spain. So that's almost the same as being Spanish, right? Your family's been on vacation there, right?
Sure.
Exactly the same thing. And on top of that, some of her family eventually did move to Spain when Hillary was an adult, I should say. So her brother eventually met and married a woman in Spain and moved there. And her parents decided to semi-retire in Spain in 2011. That is the same year that Hillary met Alec Baldwin. So neither her parents or herself or her brother actually lived in Spain until Hillary's already with Alec Baldwin. And none of them, other than Hillary, identifies as Spanish themselves. None of them speaks with an accent. None of them claims Spain as their place of ancestry, their nationality, their identity in any way. It's just Hillary who does that. Anywho, when Morrissey revealed what she found to the public, members of the press and the judgmental hordes like me began doing their own digging. Among the things they found, in September 2020, someone in a DC Urban Moms thread dedicated to Hilaria posted, her mother had a thriving career in Boston for many years. How could her daughter have been raised in Spain? Even if she vacationed there, there's no reason she would have picked up an accent like that. It's fake. So this is months before the whole revelation that she's not Spanish. Mm-hmm. Additionally, in 2020, in October, a negative reviewer of Baldwin's Mom Brain podcast on Apple Podcasts wrote, I know Hillary Hayward Thomas from the Cambridge School of Weston in Massachusetts. She did not have an accent then and didn't change her name to Hilaria because she's not Spanish. So please stop using an accent in this podcast and please stop interrupting your guests.
Oh my God.
I love that that is such shade because it is a review of her podcast, but it's also just like outing her for being a fraud.
Those iTunes reviews are no joke, man. You and I both get them for our shows, and people can get mean, and
Yes.
I always say if it's honest, then I can handle it. But I mean, so they mean like this woman's just being, she is so, I wonder if she taught yoga with that accent.
Oh, well, I have heard through the grapevine from some people who took her yoga classes that sometimes yes, sometimes no. And I'm not going to name names, but I do know somebody who worked with her on one of her endeavors who said she almost always spoke in a Spanish accent.
That is a
I'm not going
commitment
to tell you what that
character.
endeavor was, but it was almost always in very thick Spanish.
Oh, I used to host a podcast called the Fit Bottom Girls Podcast, and I was a writer for them for many years. I was in the fitness and wellness space, and you and I've actually talked about toxic positivity off mic and how we want to do a show about that one day. And that was one of those DVDs I got to, and I don't have kids, so I didn't want to review it. But Alec is perfectly like, this is my Spanish wife who's pregnant, who could do all these amazing things. I mean, he had her back, I have to say. Like they must really love each other because he was, but I wonder, did she use this accent when she met him?
I always wonder that too.
Right?
I always wonder. All right. So back to all of this dirt that people are digging up. So in addition to that DC Urban Moms blog and that Apple Podcast review, there was also a whole subreddit dedicated to her months before she was outed. And among the many comments on that subreddit was this one. She is the Spanish Rachel Dolezal who faked an identity to get famous.
That's what I'm thinking of, yeah.
We all remember Rachel Dolezal. She was white but pretending to be black and working for the NCAA and a lot of other problems. We're not going to go down the road with her. Yes, that's right. Yes. So those three examples I just gave there, those are just in 2020. In fact, there are examples that the public and press dug up that went back years pointing to her fake identity. And in some cases, Hilaria's own Twitter showed her clapping back at people who were calling her out, who were saying, I know you're not really Spanish. And she was clapping back at them years earlier than this. So there was a paper trail going back long enough, almost to the very beginning when she started this fakeness. So this is no joke. Anywho, Hilaria, she knows she's in trouble now. She knows everyone's seen those Twitter threads. She knows everybody's been talking about her. So eventually she does decide she needs to respond to the frenzy. And how does she do it? She goes onto her Instagram again. She releases a video. And in it, there's a bunch of word salad. A lot of it's hard to parse out. But among the things she says is, I'm born in Boston, and then I spent some of my childhood in Boston, some of my childhood in Spain. Ethnically, I'm a mix of many, many, many things. And then she explains her Spanish accent away, saying it's just her being nervous and overly enunciating certain things. And then she says we should all just let it go about her name change because she says it's just a few letters different. So I think we shouldn't be so upset about it. Mm-hmm. Alec Baldwin, being Alec Baldwin and always, having his wife's back, he comments on the post saying, you never claimed you were from Spain. Despite the fact that he had already said in many, many interviews before.
Also on the Comedy Central roast of Alec Baldwin, they make a whole, Nikki Glazer's like, how do you say your wife's name? And he was like, Hilaria. He really over-announced it.
Yes.
He was selling that too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But she doesn't stop there with that one video. A little over 6 months later, in July 2021, Hilaria again takes to Instagram, broaching the whole subject of her identity, saying that she identifies as, quote, multi. She went on to speak of the oppression that multi people like herself face, saying, quote, there are people who want to deny others their right to belong. When you are multi, it can feel hard to belong. She's very
You can't see
oppressed.
my eye roll, y'all. It's ay, ay,
But not long after, the eyes of the world were on the Baldwins for a totally different reason, which you already touched on, Margot.
ay.
In October 2021, on the film set of Rust, a movie Alec was producing and starring in, he accidentally shot and killed his director of photography, Helena Hutchins. This was obviously an enormous tragedy for Hutchins and her family, but Hilaria, of course, somehow made it all about herself. During an interview between a journalist and Alec, she continually interrupted until Alec eventually turned to her and said, "Will you do me a favor and let me answer the questions?" She also held a now infamous impromptu sidewalk press conference with several members of the press around the time of the shooting, speaking again in her very thick Spanish accent, even though we all know at this point she's not Spanish.
Oh my God.
And when the criminal charges against Alec were eventually dropped, she celebrated on Instagram with a very intimate post of her cuddled in his lap, her head on his shoulder, and no mention of Helena Hutchins or her family at all. So instead, just have a hot, sexy shot of you and your husband. And that was her way of showing happy ending, right?
Can you imagine, just between us, being on that set and having that happen, the trauma that crew put up with in that moment? You know what I mean? They've only known each other for a few weeks, but someone being killed in your presence, like just doing their job, and then like this is the ending, and it's like, oh, we're just cozy in a lap right now in our fall colors or whatever it was. Like, I just can't imagine how those people feel.
No,
It's got to be devastating, and it's just it's so tone deaf.
It's so callous.
Yes.
It's just like, really, this is not about you, Hilaria. This is not about your
No.
love life right now. There is somebody who does not have a wife in his lap right now,
Yeah.
and that's Helena Hitchens' widower.
Or yeah, a kid without their mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God, it's so terrible. So this brings us to the present, and I know this is not your normal format, but I have decided, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to list the top 8 reasons why I consider Hilaria Baldwin a creep.
Go for it.
This list could be 25 items long, maybe 100, but I've just decided on 8. So reason number 1, Hilaria is pretending to be a member of a marginalized group.
Right.
I don't know if people outside the U.S. understand this, but here in the U.S., people who speak Spanish or descend from Spain, we call them Hispanic people here, face anti-Hispanic discrimination in real and ongoing and structural ways. And this is why the U.S. Census and other government agencies routinely ask people if they are Hispanic to help governments and communities enforce anti-discrimination laws, regulations, hiring policies, and so on. And this is why it is inappropriate to pretend to be Hispanic when you are not. It is wearing the identity of a marginalized class as a costume. And you can take off that costume anytime you want to. You can let that spray tan like fade. You can decide to just speak with the most Boston accent you want to. You don't have to, live with the everyday reality of being Hispanic in an anti-Hispanic culture. All right. Reason number 2, Hilaria is a creep. She presents herself as somebody, aside from being Hispanic, she presents herself as somebody with a semi-immigrant identity who struggles with English. And for many Americans, regardless of whether or not their first language is Spanish or Mandarin or Portuguese or whatever it may be, for many Americans, this is a fact of everyday life. And again, unlike Hilaria, they can't just code switch into speaking like a private school educated Massachusetts person if they want to. This is something that is a real struggle in lots of ways, and the world is not necessarily set up fairly for people who are bilingual or who are immigrant. But Hilaria just gets to do it because it gives her some sort of street cred when she wants to do it.
Right.
Reason number 3, Hilaria has overtly played up the idea that she is oppressed when she in fact is not oppressed. In her Instagram post about always being mistaken for the nanny, in her Instagram post about being body shamed for having a yoga body. Oh, poor you. Oh,
Please.
in her Instagram post about not belonging anywhere because she's multi. The fact is she is not oppressed, and don't pretend you are oppressed for these reasons when other people actually legitimately are oppressed. None of these are oppression. This is not oppression. Okay. Reason number 4, Hilaria Baldwin is a creep. She has continually agreed to be featured inside and on the covers of magazine like Hola, like Latina. And in doing so, she has taken away page space from people who are actually Hispanic and or Latina. Why are you taking up the bandwidth that isn't actually the space you should be taking up, Hilaria? That should be going to other people. You're taking away opportunities from others. All right. I'm going to shift gears here. My 5th reason for thinking Hilaria is a creep, she promotes the idea that postpartum women should look like they've never given birth, and she blames women if they don't. This is an idea not just promoted on her Instagram feed, on her DVD, in her book, but also in interviews. Talking to The Cut, she said this, which just drives me nuts. Quote, "If you have a natural birth, you just deflate. Every day, your body gets smaller and smaller, and if you breastfeed, it goes away faster. Your body is supposed to do this as long as you treat it right." So, ladies, if your body doesn't deflate within a matter of days, it's because it's your fault. You're not treating it right. That's your fault.
Also, she has nannies and assistants and cooks and dietitians and all of that at the reg, like as soon as she needs it. Like versus another mom, like has to usually do her job and be the job person and the job of being a mother and the wife and the homemaker and all that other crap. Yeah. And you're trying to recover from giving birth.
Was having to actually do her own laundry. Would she be able to just take selfies and exercise all day? Like the laundry alone would take up half her day, right?
It took up mine yesterday in this heat. No joke.
It makes me so mad. It's like women who are shaming other women for these kinds of things, especially when you are so rich. Like, come on. This is a privilege issue. This is not that those other moms aren't exercising hard enough for doing what you do. It's not fair. All right. Reason number 6, Hilaria is a creep. And this is, full disclosure, more of my own pet peeve than a true case of creepitude. But I just fucking hate the photos she posts of herself doing yoga on her Instagram feed. So her signature is to do yoga in unconventional places, like on the stove, while wrapping Christmas presents with scissors in her hands. She does yoga in all the most irritating places, which I find unsanitary, dangerous, and tacky. Like, when you're at the airport and you're just trying to walk on the people mover and some asshole is doing yoga poses and doing a TikTok video while they're on the people mover and you just want to punch them? That's what she is doing all the time on her Instagram feed. And I just find it so main character energy, ruining it for the rest of us. Like, please, lady, just get out of the way. I'm trying to get to gate 3. Please.
It's this manic pixie dream girl in yoga pants. I mean, just this convention that is so like, I'm just carefree and flexible. Boops.
Look at me.
Fuck off.
And right in the middle of the food court when you're trying to eat. She's like that kind of person. Just drives me nuts. Okay. Reason number 7, Hilaria is a creep, in my opinion. It's the way, to go back to that main character energy, it's the way she always inserts herself in shit that's not about her in the most tacky ways. Helena Hutchins' death is not about her. Mm-mm. Interrupting your husband when he's being interviewed about this death. Why are you interrupting this interview? It's not about you. Get out of that interview. Also, just like the kind of podcast host she is, the fact that she, back when she had her Mom Brain podcast, she did not ever let anybody finish a sentence. God forbid you invite a guest onto your show and then not let them talk. Such a pet peeve of mine.
Huge pet peeve of mine as well. I think Bethany Frankel has the same problem on her. I mean, I couldn't listen to it. It's just it interrupts people. Why do you have a guest? Why even ask them a question if you don't want to hear what they have to say?
Drives me nuts. It's like, it's not all about you, Hilaria and Bethany.
A good interviewer is a good listener.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Which you are. And that, and you only have to listen a little longer because this gets us to reason number 8 that Hilaria is a creep. She wrote a self-help book lest I remind you, called the Living Clearly method, when she is the furthest thing from clear and transparent about who she is and why should we trust her to tell us about how to live our lives and how to do things right and how to live clearly when she refuses to do any of that herself. I just can't stand that version of a self-help author. I've read, as you know, Margot, from one of my shows, By the Book, I have read and lived by almost 100 self-help books. And one of my biggest pet peeves is if I can do it, anyone can. It's like, no, not anybody can do what you're doing because of all the advantages you have. And in this case, not only can I not do what you're doing, you are not doing it yourself. You are not living clearly. So shut the front door and don't tell me how to do it.
Exactly. Good job, Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I hate the whole, especially the skinny shaming that people claim is a thing, which is not a thing. Skinniness is fetishized in our culture, in many cultures, and being overweight is demonized. Period. End of statement. So someone calls you skinny, even really skinny, it's not the same as someone calling you fat or really fat. These are just two different things. These are...
Yes.
And it's...
I mean, more often than not, telling somebody they're really skinny, even if it sounds with the tone of concern, is a way of expressing jealousy or of celebrating how thin you are. That is not the same as shaming somebody. Fat shaming is a real structural issue in America and a lot of other parts of the world. In the US, it is well documented that fat women get paid significantly less, that they have a harder time getting hired for jobs, that there is discrimination that is real and structural in a number of arenas, not just in the workplace. And so, yeah, fat shaming is part of a much bigger real thing. Skinny shaming is just kind of bitchy jealousy, right?
That's all that is, and I'm just tired of it. That and when white people say reverse racism.
Shut up.
I mean, as a white chick from the suburbs, I know better.
Yes. Yeah. Or straight shaming, like you're just trying to make straight people feel bad about themselves. Parade,
right? Who will think of the straight guys? All right. Let's pivot to somebody who's not a creep. Do you want to hear about a non-creep today? This was your suggestion, and we were going to use her because we talked about the fire at the rock club in Rhode Island from the band Great White during their show, and we were looking for New England people, Rhode Island people to feature as a non-creep, and one of our listeners in the What a Creep Facebook page mentioned Viola Davis, and we weren't able to use her then, but you mentioned her, and I was like, yes, let's do this. So she went to Rhode Island College. She also went to high school in Rhode Island. She is an American actress and producer. She has an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony, and EGOT winner. She's an exceptional actress. We all know this about her. She's a Leo, August 11th. She's beautiful. You know, she just has that amazing
gorgeous
face and the hair and just the way that she presents herself. But in spite of all, in addition to all of that, she happens to be a really decent human being. She is one of my favorite people to follow on social media, especially Instagram. She uses her platform, and she has 11 million followers, by the way.
I'm one of them. Yep.
To promote healthy body image, to promote women. It's women from all kinds of backgrounds, women's spaces. She is somebody that truly cares and wants to make a difference in the world. She is somebody who's donated all kinds of funds to her hometown public library, Central Falls, Rhode Island. She has given money to them for their high school, for their theater programs. She works against child hunger across the United States. She is partnership with people to help bring people of all backgrounds to be in production, because that is this whole, kids of famous people get all the breaks, to get into show business. And it's very hard to find your way in. And she's one of those people that really helps others. She doesn't kick the ladder from under her. She actually brings people with her. She also worked on getting Georgia voters, in 2020 to vote with the ballot boxes and via mail, which, by the way, it's a very safe way to vote and legal. I voted by mail since 1990. It's fine, y'all. There's really no problem. She's just an amazing human. She's done all kinds of programs for hunger, especially childhood hunger across America, which is one of the greatest shames of this country. We are a very wealthy nation, but we have school lunch programs that are like in debt to the eyeballs because kids can't afford to pay for it. And she's one of those people that's speaking out about that. Just an amazing, amazing woman. You've seen her I saw her in Doubt. I didn't get to see her on Broadway. That's on my list of people to check out. She was also in The Help, and I also love her because she calls out The Help for the kind of the bullshit that The Help is. The white saviorism that is The Help.
Yes.
But she's not a snob. She does all kinds of work. She was amazing in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. She played Ma Rainey there. She's just, she's an amazing actor, but she's also a really decent human being. And she's so positive to follow and not a toxic positivity. She's all just about beauty comes in many shapes and forms and colors and sizes. And we should be embracing that, especially here in America where we're supposed to be about diversity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my not creep this week. Viola Davis.
Margot, thank you so much for choosing Viola Davis. I dare everybody listening right now to look at her Instagram feed and not feel your heart grow 3 sizes too big. Everything she posts is just so full of love and embracing everybody and accepting everybody. And let's look for the kindness in the world and let's try to be a little kinder ourselves. And she really walks the walk. She doesn't just talk the talk. She doesn't just post something cute on Instagram. She actually, as you were saying, lives that way. She gives back that way. And I also highly recommend listening to the audiobook version of her memoir if you can, because the way she delivers it, the beauty of her voice, the real trauma of her story and how she overcame her background. She knows what it's like to be a hungry child. She knows what it's like to live in poverty. She knows what it's like to deal with real oppression, not the fake oppression that Hilaria Baldwin claims that she faces. She really is just a spark of joy, just totally inspirational. That audiobook, it's like being in the presence of like what she is, like a great Shakespearean actor delivering the most heartfelt story. So I highly recommend that as well.
Her book is called Finding Me. Yes. So definitely I'm going to put that on my Audible right away and put that in my ear holes because I need to hear her. She also, with her social media, she does promote, by the way, smaller accounts. Like she's helping people find a big audience with her 11 million followers. Unlike a lot of people who just said, like, this is my movie, here's the tequila I own. And, I get it. That's fine. But I think I like people who also use that to reach out to others and bring them along. I think that's just amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, that is our show today. If you have ideas for people that we should, for creeps and for non-creeps, please reach out in all those spaces I mentioned at the top of the show. We love it when you use the Annie Potts gift. We got one from Ghostbusters, but if you have other ideas, please, use that. I want to thank Kristen, by the way, for having me on inviting me and having meet the hosts of Fixing Famous People, Chris and Dominic. I was just on their show. We talked about Jimmy Fallon. We talked about Cher. I did my Cher singing. It was pretty fun. So thank you all so much. And my other shows are Book versus Movie and also Dorking Out. You could find me at Brooklyn Margot on Twitter and on the TikTok and everything else. I'm at Brooklyn Fit Chick, including my site. Kristen, where can people find you?
Well, I hope you can all take a moment to check out The Daily Fail. That's my podcast where we lambast the tabloids. We do close readings. We do fact checking. We laugh and laugh a lot. And so that's called The Daily Fail. And also, please check out How to Be Fine. That show digs into the wellness world. It's not all dragging it down. Sometimes there's good things in the wellness world, too, just to be clear on that. So we look at the good and the bad of the wellness world. And we also answer advice questions on that show. And you can always learn more about me on my website, which is KristenMeinzer.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Kristen Meinzer or on Instagram at K10Meinzer. That's K10 Meinzer.
Excellent. All right, everybody. Be safe. Be good. Don't be a creep.
Don't be a creep.
Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.